So good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this very important session, which is around transformation in higher education with a risk lens. So I would like to introduce the session moderator, Mr. Subhashish Nath. He is the Senior Vice President and Service Line Leader for Enterprise Risk and Compliance at Genpact, and also the Mentor for Global Risk Management Institute, GRMI. He has been focusing on risk and compliance for the last 20 years, and he has a deep domain knowledge around specific solutions, anti-corruption, ERM, third-party risk management, internal audit, SOX, and so on. So without much ado, I hand it over to his able hands to take this session forward. Over to you, Mr. Subhashish.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this session of what I'm certain all of you recognize as an absolutely terrific set of panelists. Thank you, Higher Education Forum of FICCI, for allowing us to put this together. We are absolutely delighted to be able to bring to you a set of panelists to talk about how applying a risk lens is an inevitable imperative as the higher education sector goes through the world of transformation. Transformation is not new to the corporate world. Enough and more businesses have dealt with tech disruption over the last 48 months, 36 to 48 months, very significantly. Global competition coming into India has not been new for the country. Many industries have dealt with it. Many industries have gradually experienced protected era moving out. So there are enough learnings that many businesses have already been through. And therefore, part of what hopefully you will all get to hear today is how does the education sector prepare itself, the higher education sector prepare itself for it? Are there things to learn from the past? Are there an opportunity to not have to do things from scratch? And will there be players who will exploit the current environment better than others? Because that's the fun of risk. It's not always a threat, it's an opportunity. Those who exploit it will actually move forward much faster. We've got a fantastic mix of panelists, I think, between Dr. Pani, Professor Vij. We've got real deep India academia experience, relevance, leadership in here. In terms of Rahul, we've got someone who's seen this play out in the corporate world in his PepsiCo days, through multiple boards that he sees as board lens on how do risk committees or how does risk management work well. I think Professor Paape brings a unique combination of having been a risk leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers in Netherlands before, and then a dean with Nyenrode University, continues to be associated with the university, so a unique mix. Jenitha as the global chair for Institute of Internal Auditors, and her corporate background before, as well as a sort of stint with regulator. I think, again, a fantastic spin. And Sabina, yet another version of someone who's been in the corporate world, seen it from a difficult risk lens, which is ethics and compliance, and then is with, again, back in academia in the Singapore world. So thank you so much, panelists, for having sort of made time for this. Is just a completely enviable group that we've got together. So without spending too much more time, I'm going to go right into this and come to you, Dr. Pani. What is the kind of disruption that you are seeing in the higher education world and your perspectives on it?
Yes, Subhasis, what we are witnessing is truly a disruption that was waiting to happen. Because of the COVID, we have seen a lot of innovations during this time. Please bear in mind that the current university model that we are following is a Prussian model. And you know that the state Prussia has ceased to exist. So I'm sure the fate of the current model also will have the same fate. With the implementation of Industry 4.0 and the digital transformation process, all the higher learning institutes are going through. This model will undergo a change at the institutional level at the regulators level that would have to be compatible with all the stakeholders. About the technology and infrastructure risk, technologies are rapidly changing with an objective to providing an enhanced student experience. All the institutes are trying their best to explore the technology which is currently available. This will lead to the risk associated with more frequently changing technology investment, as well as the organizational dynamics for new technology adoption. Major concern now is that the availability and reach of the high speed, high quality, uninterrupted internet services, specifically in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, and mostly in the rural areas. While this doesn't significantly diminish the learning experience in asynchronous programs, there is a severe risk of negative impact to learning outcomes in synchronous programs, which is most interactive in the real time. The continuously reducing cost of online education infrastructure has led to a mushrooming of numerous providers of online education and training programs. All of you know that there are a lot of platforms available. If you have content ready, you can use that platform to deliver that content to the required students. With the absence of widely accepted quality standards for online programs, because there is no regulations in the new education policy, they are thinking about have some regulations on this. A varying quality programs are offered. There is a risk of reduced acceptance of online programs by recruiting organizations. That's what there is no quality control. In my 15-20 years of experience, I have seen that people who have done the online certification from our institute, the recruiter doesn't feel comfortable to recruit those type of students. The increased competition has another problem, like choice making, difficult for the learners to choose between programs, because the same program is offered by 10 institute, 20 institute, very difficult to choose which one they should go for. With the competitions largely based on price and profit margin of online education providers, which in turn would impact their ability to make continuing investment required to enhance the students' learning experience. One of the major concerns which I have seen is that significantly lower completion rate. Today, in the morning sessions, I was listening to one of the presenters from Coursera. The number of courses, the number of institutes offered the courses is very high. Number of students who do the program is also very high, but I have seen the completion rate is very low. Specifically, any asynchronous programs and the risk of reputational damage for the online education program in general. So that will reflect to the online other programs. So innovation during COVID-19 has created many opportunities for higher learning institutes, but at the same time, it created a lot of problems. Like for example, in the MBA schools, we try to do the assessment of the students, which reflects learning. Like in the pedagogy we use experiential learning, project-based learning, all these models, so that the student learning can be tested. But there is a limitation in this online teaching to the students, and the limitation of the question paper format. In the last 8 months experience, as a dean of the institute, I have seen most of the faculty prefer to choose MCQ test. And I feel that MCQ is not the proper way to test the students' learning in the particular course. We have taken the best platform available to do the online test, but still there is a problem in limitations around invigilations. Like they have some facility of proctoring, but it's not that good as the offline invigilations, what we do in the campus. Now, most of the parents' concern is that when the students, they come to a school, they go to the class, sits in front of the class for 6 to 8 hours. But when they're at home, they're sitting in front of the screen for 8 hours in a day to attend the online classes. So the parents' most concern is that the mental health of the students. Now, one of the major problems is that peer learning. That's what when you come to the campus, possibly a lot of things you learn outside the class. That's what many people go to a best school because of the peer learning. Now, I will conclude with my talk that this part is that we have seen the offline learning. We have seen the online learning. We have to take the best part of both the ways of delivering the content to the students, and we'll possibly have a blended learning, which will be the future of learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pani. That was truly sort of all-encompassing sort of view. But at this stage, if I could come to you, it's a bit of an echo. Yeah, just could go on mute, please. Yeah. At this stage, if I could come to you, Professor Vij, for your views on how are you sort of seeing this disruption play out, and your perspectives on it.
Okay. So, Ashish, good afternoon, and completely delighted to be a part of this, panel. I'll take a little cue from what you started off with, and then what Professor Pani has said. You're talking of risk as a threat, as an opportunity. In fact, I would like to call it as a creative challenge. It's an opportunity for all higher education institutions and universities to relook and reposition themselves. In fact, even rethink. In fact, this will help in evolving our thinking to be a lot more proactive and not reactive to all the issues which Professor Pani has just highlighted. So it could be the disciplinary issue, it could be the examination issue, it could be the low attention span issue of the students. One additional aspect which I would like to bring in here is about cross-functional thinking. And cross-functional thinking and learning, in my opinion, is an important challenge which the higher educational institution will need to build in their curriculum and in their thinking. If you go to the corporate sector, we always find that the business problems are rarely unidirectional. So how can the solutions be one-dimensional? And hence, our teaching has to be cross-functional. So what distinguishes successful universities from the not so successful ones? I would say that the successful universities and the present kind of environment is an opportunity for us to completely align and listen to the market. We need to align whatever courses we are teaching and create curriculum which are, I would say, around the challenges which are being faced by the society, whether it's environment, whether it's global warming, whether it's pollution, or any of the issues we are facing in the current scenario. In fact, if you look at the very successful universities, whether it could be a Stanford or a Harvard or an Oxford, each one of them developed when the regulators gave them a free hand. So the aura which a Harvard has today, it is when the regulators let go of these universities. So in India, what better than now to get an external push? To end the first part of our discussion on a very, very positive note, let me just say that we have seen a lot of disruptions, but these disruptions would definitely be shaping the future of education in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vij. Really appreciate that. A bit of change of track. So everything going digital, natural, that cyber threat is more real in the higher education sector than before. So coming to you, Jenitha, your take on how do you think the education sector should be thinking about it? You've worn this lens a little bit from an Institute of Internal Auditors perspective, where you've had a lot of stuff online available for the longest time. So your perspectives.
Subhashish, and hello everybody. Thanks for having me. And it's such a pleasure to participate with so many leaders on this panel and listen to all of their wisdom and knowledge on this very, very important subject and something that's close to my heart. So yes, from the perspective of, and to your previous question where you asked around higher education, it also impacts professional bodies like the IIA as well. So, from the perspective of universities having extensive databases of thousands of students and staff information, it includes rich assets that are actually very attractive to cyber attackers, whether it's personal information, financial information, whether it's research and development matters, and universities and colleges and professional organizations or institutions or bodies will have to increasingly educate academics, staff, administrators, and students about protecting data privacy, data security, how to avoid violating copyright issues and other data privacy matters. You've got to make cyber hygiene a habit. It's so important for organizations, even at university level, to understand the concepts around security hygiene and what it entails. Campus visitors bring along their own equipment, bring your own devices, mobile phones. Academics connect across the world with other academics or other students across the world. How do we limit the number of people that have administrator privileges? And we've got to be aware of malicious insiders and malicious outsiders. So it's becoming increasingly important for universities to up their game when it comes to the cyber world and the cyber physical platforms, and how we actually need to make sure that the citizens within the university's ecosystem understand the imperatives around the cyber world and build tangible aspects around vigilance and resilience. And yes, there were lots of issues experienced during COVID, specifically where ransomware became the norm for universities, for professional bodies, where sites were brought down because of DOS interference or attacks or ransomware attacks that came through. You've got to, again, I emphasize the security hygiene aspects that universities need to be cognizant of and to consider what are those interventions that you would need to put in place and understand where your intellectual property lies. What are your crown jewels? How do you go into depth, from a defense perspective on your crown jewels that sits within a university's paradigm or higher education paradigm and protect that with the utmost care. And that for me is extremely important, Subhashish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenitha. Professor Paape, you've seen this with your lens at Nyenrode. What are your views?
Thank you, Subhashish, and again, thanks for having me here. Well, if I look at the issue, then I can relate to what Jenitha was telling us, that cybersecurity is most surely an issue we need to take care of. And if I look at the Netherlands, well, I wouldn't say we did the best we could have. So we already had a number of cyber attacks prior to COVID-19, and many universities were being hit in the Netherlands. And of course, as a result of COVID-19, the number went up. So it's really an issue. Again, ransomware was happening a lot. Stolen data via students was happening a lot. And if I may add one issue to this discussion, in the Netherlands, there is a real concern about the way we deal with China. And we have a lot of Chinese students, and we have a lot of cooperation with universities in China. And that has been a debate for the last number of months. But now, recently, there was another concern about the way we deal with the cooperation with Chinese universities, with let's say, the perspective of what is happening, and are they going to, use students to steal the knowledge and the patents we have in the Netherlands. And we do have quite a few universities, 15 in a small country like the Netherlands, and a number of them are highly ranked on a global scale. And there is a lot of knowledge that is, let's say, worthwhile to take a look at if you are a country like China. So that is, again, I don't want to go too much into geopolitics, but it is an issue that has been around for the last few months, and that is related to cyber, although there is another element to it as well, Subhashish. So that would be my perspective.
Thank you so much, Professor Paape. So again, a bit of change of tracks, and coming to you, Sabina, do you see now as a time when institutions need to look at their own policies, playbooks for really protecting their own reputation and ensuring high governance and regulatory standards?
Absolutely. So thank you again for inviting me. I'm going to actually start with a slightly different look at this perspective, because as educators, I think there's a risk both ways. One, for us as the infrastructure within the university, and second, from the student's perspective. I'm a really, really big advocate of the fact that we have to start teaching our students about this risk at a very earlier stage. So literally at the time of orientation, they need to be made aware of what these risks are to them as individuals, and then what that impact has on educational institutions. So I'm going to look at something. There's an article, very interesting article that came out in 2013 from the Kelley School of Business. The author is Mark Schwartz, and he talks about developing and sustaining an ethical culture. And I think we need to start this journey when students embark on their higher education. I would be so bold as to say it should happen even at school levels, and I think there are some courses that actually define that. So what does the article talk about? It says there's a 20-60-20 rule. And I'd like to use that because sometimes it's easier to actually anchor our conversations around tangible numbers. 20% of the students will always do the right thing. That's their personal moral compass. And this would work in corporations, it would work in any part of the world that we're looking at. 20% will always try and circumvent any rule or any procedure or any framework that we actually put in. But 60% of our population, and in this case, our students to begin with, actually want to do the right thing. And it's a shame on us if we don't create that framework for them to be able to do the right thing. And going back even one step further, or backward actually, is how do they define what is the playbook? Do we tell them when they start? Do we talk about ethical implications of their actions, both on them individually and on institutions as well? So for the 60%, I think, and all of my earlier speakers have talked about the risk that we're facing, whether it's from cyber attacks from within the student body, from external attacks. We've talked about grading, we've talked about continuous assessment. All of that comes into play if we can actually give the students the knowledge of what that playbook is. What is the definition of plagiarism? What is cheating? If we don't use this in our corporate world when we start our careers, why is it okay to do so when we are in an educational institution? And interestingly, the biggest advocates for bringing in checks and balances and ethical policies are actually the 20% who will always do the right thing, because they feel they are disadvantaged. They're missing the level playing field, right? Because if somebody else is going to cheat, they then ask the question of us, should we be cheating as well if you can't create that process? So I think when we talk about risk, we have to talk about risk both internally, externally, and what's within our circle of control. What can we put in to empower the students who are starting to get a very clear definition, even though it seems really obvious? Clearly it isn't, because we are saying that as being one of the risk factors. So my strong recommendation would be to have an orientation program as soon as they come in that talks about the risks that Leen is talking about, Madhu's talking about, Ashish is talking about, and make them realize what it means for them in the individual sense, but also for the institution. And it's a country reputation as well, right? So I think very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina. Professor Vij, you've sort of, beyond your FMS capacity, you've actually had the opportunity to look at multiple institutes and assess them. So what's your perspective on how should the institutions be thinking about this?
Two issues, which again, I would add on to what Sabina has said. In fact, what Sabina has said ultimately boils down to knowing the heart of the students, somewhere touching their heart that, how important integrity is, how important ethics is. The curriculum is something which we need to continuously review, upgrade, align it with the best practices, make it more relevant, whether it's case studies or whether it's a real life scenario or, whatever way we would like to do that. The whole issue is you have to make the program more saleable, more relevant from the student's perspective. Now, the challenge here for the faculty and the professors is how do you discourage rote learning? And the second issue is, which is connected to this, would be how we set our question papers, the online examination. Let me honestly tell you, with one of the institutions, which is a very, very premier B school where I was associated, this was a challenge which we faced. Normally for us, setting a question paper is maybe about 3-4 hours. But here, once, had to devote a lot of time in setting the question paper. It had to be in the, in the tick mark format, choosing the best alternative because there was no choice. But the paper had to be it had to be set in such a manner that it was completely analytical based. And then there's one way out which I have worked is see the number of questions and give less time to the students. So, so they have a little less time for cross-learning and cross-talking, if we could say. Another issue which definitely needs attention in a country like India is about internet connectivity. So there are problems at the student end, there are problems at the institution's end, but connectivity and reliable internet connectivity is definitely an issue which we will need to take care of going forward.
Thank you, Professor Vij. Coming to you, Professor Pani, are you seeing institutions kind of use this as an opportunity? Are you seeing institutions actually sort of bring in a positive spin on this whole thing, whereby they're able to leverage the new environment better than others?
So this disruptions which happened in the last few years, it has a big impact on most of the higher learning institutes. It has forced all the stakeholders to adapt to this new technology. And as I said in my first sessions, the best way to go ahead is the hybrid model, or what we call a blended model. We tested that in the institute XLRI. We have seen that some of the skill development programs we do, the advantage is that the people who have missed the MBA bus, they can do the program with XLRI without coming to Jamshedpur. So they attend the classes from their respective cities, and in a certificate program of 6 months, they come once to the campus and have an interaction with the faculty in campus. So that's what the advantage of that. And again, one more advantage we got exploited last few years is that because of the locational disadvantage we have in Jamshedpur, not only the experts from India, we invite them to speak to the students. Last time I invited someone from Singapore, which I was teaching a course on digital transformation. He was teaching fintech. So he is the CEO of a fintech company. So what I mean to say is that we can explore the possibility of inviting experts throughout the world, looking to exactly for the time zone sometimes makes a problem. Also, as we are a self-funded institute, we try to conduct some of the programs from the other part of the world on HR, on the leadership, on the OB. We conducted some training programs for those organizations. So I see that a lot of opportunities are there for institutes to explore this technology and make it better for the students' learning. Even when this online learning was not there, when you do the offline learning, we use technology in terms of simulation. So which offline classes also we use it very effectively so that the student learning will improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pani. Rahul, sort of coming to you, hearing the academic perspective for the longest time, and like we spoke earlier, corporates got a fair amount of expectation that possibly will change. Sorry, somebody needs to come. Thank you. I think, do you see expectations of corporate India changing from the higher education group? That's one. I want to dovetail another part of the question into this, which is, you've handled risk from a very different perspective. Like I started off by saying, you've handled transformation, digital disruption, global competition. How do you see some of that being sort of leverageable by the higher education sector? So I have two components to that question.
So you're giving me loads of time for this then. You asked me for two very important discussions. Okay, look, the first thing is that my objective is not to bat for a large-scale vocationalization of academic curricula. I mean, that's not the intent. The reality of the situation is that the delivery format for education coming out of, necessitated by COVID, has undergone a significant change. And I think it is very clear that we are still coming to grips with what the true nature of the change is and what its eventual implications might be and what is the set of opportunities that it might eventually provide for educators, especially educators in the higher learning space. I think business schools in general are likely to be able to adapt more quickly. It is the nature of, it's in their DNA to do so. But other institutions of academic learning, universities, might be slower off the starting block. So that's entirely possible. But I'm going to kind of restrict my response to corporate expectations. Okay, corporates kind of always warm and react to opportunity. Okay, and I do believe that from the perspective of corporates, this environment today is actually the germination of an opportunity. The opportunity itself is not clear, but we can sense the opportunity, and they should sense the opportunity. But what that basically then means is that there has to be a fundamental shift in the nature of the relationship between institutions of learning and corporates in general. I mean, academic institutions have traditionally been seen as suppliers of educated, skilled resources. And I suspect that has to kind of morph into more of a partnering relationship with corporates. So I think whether it was Professor Pani or perhaps Professor Vij who raised this point about customers, right? So it is an acknowledgement of corporates as customers and trying to determine what it is that they really truly need from our academic institutions, and then use that to frame delivery of content and the content itself. So it involves then transitioning potentially from rigid curriculum and rigid programs in the traditional way that we're used to seeing in Indian universities, to perhaps being somewhat supplemented with more bespoke or customized programs that are more in sync with what the employers and the corporate world is looking for, hence the partnership. The other element of partnership, and Professor Pani also kind of referred to it in a tangential way, was around supplementing pure academic faculties with externally experienced faculty. Okay, again, easier to see in the context of business schools, perhaps less obvious in the case of universities in general. but they might have their own solution from research institutions and so on and so forth. But there is an opportunity for that collaboration. And then finally, I think it would, in some sense, require a degree of transitioning from pure textbook content, right, to more contemporary and current content. And I think technology is a great unlock for that. Yeah, because you can access technology, you can access content from many more sources than you traditionally could do potentially. And I think that's a great opportunity. So bottom line is that there are a set of opportunities that are now opening up. The challenge is to recognize them. Opportunities don't come without their fair share of unintended consequences, as we all know in the corporate world. You start off down one path and there'll be 5 or 6 others which are kind of staring you in the face as obstacles or challenges to overcome. There will be a fair share of that, but I think the opportunity is clear and the expectation is also therefore clear. Okay, so that is the first part of your question. Now, do you want me to get into the second part on the risk management? Okay.
Please go ahead.
So look, risk management is an evolving world, all right? The reason it becomes very challenging, and I think Leen knows about this, he's been part of a risk management practice. There are no textbooks on the subject, okay? It's a world that has started to evolve over the last 15 years or so, and it is fully based and predicated right now on experiences of corporates and subject matter experts like the big 4 accounting firms who then come and advise corporates how to proceed along with risk management kind of programs. But there are some core defining principles, and I think academics and the academic world would do well to kind of learn from corporates, okay, is that there is an element of, first of all, there is a process, okay? There is a framework that has to be followed, and you can't do this without frameworks in place. Now, the challenge with frameworks is, or are, that they tend invariably to be very, very prescriptive and rigid, and it's easy to be very mechanical with them. And with risk management, if that is where it ends up, I think we have sold ourselves short. Because the true power of risk management is to be able to read tea leaves, okay? Recognize the existence of tea leaves and to be able to look at them and to decipher for ourselves what they or they may not be pointing us towards, and then framing strategies to kind of deal with the risks that they're unearthing. Now, the reason I'm taking pains to talk about this is because it has an implication on the kind of people our educational system is churning out, okay? I think it was Professor Vij who talked about cross-functional thinking and learning. And that is extremely important. For these kind of processes to work, you need individuals involved who can think laterally, who can think in an abstract fashion, who can think almost in a visionary kind of a, they may sound crazy at that time when they're kind of, identifying risks of a certain kind. But yes, that is the true value and that is the true power of the process, okay? So then who should be involved with risk management? It is not necessarily, the risk management teams don't necessarily follow organizational protocols and organizational hierarchies, okay? It's not necessary that the CEO should be the chief and the departmental heads should be involved. It is horses for courses, as with all processes, okay? You find the best people, the brave people, the visionary people, the courageous people who will see it as they see it, who will call it as they see it, and who will talk about it the way they see it, okay? That's extremely important. And that is how you get ahead of the curve in the risk identification process. I'll give you a very, very small example because to me, it is something I've been involved with as a risk manager, and it kind of established for me at least a part of the process, okay? Folks would remember that there was a time in the 90s and even the early 2000s when WTO was absolutely had immense momentum, and people were talking about a global village, and China will transition gradually, India will transition gradually, all of those good things were being talked about. Now, I was involved with a global supply chain organization at that time for my employer, and our job was basically to find the most optimal cross-border supply chains, okay? And as part of the risk management thinking, we unearthed an underlying trend, which is there was this conversation around WTO happening on the one hand, and the other hand, what was also emerging was the creation of trading blocs. Okay, so you had Mercosur, you had NAFTA, you have ASEAN, you have the Eurozone, these are all trading blocs, right? And these trading blocs present barriers to entry. So they encourage trade within themselves, but they actually disincentivize people, approaching them from outside of the bloc. So what do you do to surface the risk upfront? To solve for it, it took us 5 years within the corporation. So that itself is a challenge. But the point I'm trying to get to is you need people crazy enough to be able to see stuff like this early enough in the game through some process and then be able to highlight it. Thank you, Subhashish.
Thank you so much, Rahul, for bringing in a very, very different perspective, which I'm sure people in the academia can sort of definitely draw their own parallels and inferences from. Coming to you, Professor Paape, everyone wants to talk about what this hybrid model could be. Where does the money come from? Do you think institutions have enough money to invest, and will this happen without those investments?
Well, thank you, Subhashish, for this question. And I will come up with two perspectives, and one I will refer to Rahul. If you look at the risks of technology and the need to invest in technology, well, that's a no-brainer. We have to do that. And the issue of, let's say, COVID-19 made it even more pressing. Now, let's say some time ago when the massive online open courses came along, I looked at those massive online open courses and asked myself the question as the dean, is this going to be the disruption of the system as we have it today? And after some time, I said, no, this is not going to be the disruption of the educational system as some of them at that point in time, expected it to be. Now came COVID, and we had to innovate, we had to step up, and yes, we didn't do enough from a preparation perspective, but again, okay, we learned, it was a steep learning curve, and we apply it now, and of course we are learning on a daily basis. That is okay. But now, my question was at the university at Nyenrode, where I was involved in this discussion, okay, if we are now going to, let's say, change the model from an offline program to an online program, then I'm not sure whether students and especially the executive education part of our business, which is quite a significant one, is going to be willing to pay the same amount of money for the courses we had, which were offline and are now going to be online. And the answer is no, they are not. So it's not only students in degree programs that are not willing to pay the same amount of money, but it's also especially the executive education part of our business, which is not willing to spend the same amount of money if you are going to continue to do a program on an online basis. And again, we had to invest. So from a budget perspective, okay, costs went up. And from a revenue perspective, revenue was going down. So that is, of course, causing a problem. And then you have to innovate again, not from a technology perspective, but from a business model perspective. So now I would like to relate to Rahul. So yes, I would like to see that, and again, I'm working at what we call a business university. We have very strong connections with multinational companies that we are going to step up and also connect again to the business community and also to the government, by the way, and try to come up with solutions for the business issues, but also for the societal issues, and thereby hopefully being able to come up with kind of a new business model whereby we will be able to find new streams of revenue. Because if we will not be able to do that, then we might be in jeopardy. So Rahul, I fully agree. I would like to again emphasize the connection we need to have with the business community and of course also with society at large, and thereby trying to find not only a better suited program with a better content, but also preferably in, well, other avenues like cooperation, sharing together the knowledge, and trying to help the business and thereby also helping the university. So again, there is a technology perspective. And the other one, by the way, point that I would like to make, it's not just about technology. If you look at the faculty at Nyenrode, I would say, and I'm one of them, I'm most willing to innovate and also to use new technology. The only issue is I'm quite capable, but not as capable as it should be. So we also need to invest in what I always call a help desk. You need people that are able to deal with the technology and that start reaching out to faculty and helping them as well in how to come up with a new pedagogy, a new way to deal with programs, because it is not just going to be in front of a camera and telling the same story. That it is not. You need to have a fully, a renovated, I would say, program, and thereby you need to invest in people as well to teach faculty how to make that and to bring that about. So again, I'm most grateful to Rahul because that allowed me to bring in that perspective. And yes, we need to step up, and it's more than technology, it's also about people. Thank you, Subhashish.
Thank you, Professor Paape. All panelists, I'm going to take a little bit of the moderator's liberty of now trying to sort of speed things up. We've about a half hour left for this fifth session. So, Professor Vij, coming to you, with the new education policy, how are you seeing global institutions coming in? What does that mean for Indian institutions? Your views on that?
I think this, I would call it the second generation reforms for India, educational sector reforms. And I would say this would be a game changer. This would be a game changer. And it would establish India as a global hub. Now, I'm talking of, our NEP and how, 100 foreign universities are allowed to set up offices here. In fact, it's going to be a two-way process here. So coming to the first part, the top foreign universities definitely will bring in their latest capital, the latest education, and our students would benefit from the kind of innovation in terms of pedagogy and, will facilitate the knowledge transfer amongst our students. In fact, their mere presence and collaboration would help, in terms of the research proposals, in terms of other innovation, in terms of forging partnerships, that would be a way forward. And to make it a little brief, the process will be a two-way process. So I would say high-performing Indian universities would also get a chance to set up campuses abroad, and go into joint ventures and other collaborations with top universities. This would help in the research part. And if I, go back a little to the latest budget announcement also, they've been sanctioned a substantial amount of, I think it's 5,000 crores, which, would be given to the education sector over a period of 5 years. So I think that is what would be the core strength and our core learning from this internationalization of higher education.
Thank you, Professor Vij. Jenitha, coming to you, as the general world starts to have a better appreciation for value of risk management, how do you see innovation in the curriculum being relevant for higher education in the country, and also for institutions like IA? How do you think, curriculum change and curriculum rehash is possibly an ask of the hour in the current state?
Thanks, Subhashish. For me, disruption is about evoking change and resilience. So we need to understand the learners, whether it's with professional institutes, whether it's with higher education, we need to understand that their profile would need to adapt. So we need to consider things like how, where, and why people learn, and the effectiveness of existing tools. So earlier on, Prof. Madhu referred to the digital divide and understanding the gap in terms of technology, how this has been widened during COVID itself, the stability of infrastructure, the vision and aspirations of learners, and the emotions of users due to accessibility and inability to actually access online education. I think the important aspect for us as institutions and higher education is to consider all of these aspects around recalibrating the credibility of the curriculum. How do we partner with corporates, for example, in terms of the curriculum itself, that need to shape the thinking of individuals to make it more 21st century suitable? Subhashish, I like talking about the concept of innate intelligence. So I talk about the IQ, and then, when you're in school, you get this number, that's your own intelligence itself. And we'll talk EQ when we get into the corporate world, is how your mind is working with emotions. The other ones more lately we speak about is the ones around CQ, which is the connective, collective, collaborative intelligence, cultural intelligence that we have with people around us. So each one brings uniqueness to the table. Then the other one is the adversity quotient, which is how do you change challenges into opportunities? The very important one for us, whether we're professional institutions or higher education, what we need to consider is what is now called the TQ, which is the technology quotient. How do you embrace and assimilate technology into the way we work, live, and play? So yes, it's so important for us to as a collective. So we talk about this education value chain, and it starts from young days when you're at school, but you've got role players in between that are part and parcel of building this value chain. So yes, from the Institute of Internal Auditors perspective, yes, we've got the certificate in risk management itself, the CRMA, we've got the CIA, we've got dedicated certifications that need to take place, but we need to leverage that collaborative intelligence that we have with other role players in this education ecosystem. And that for me is going to be important aspects that we need to consider, is creating those public-private partnerships, talking to corporates, understanding the 21st century impacts in terms of the cyber-physical platforms, what is expected in the workplace, and how do we embed this into the curriculums at universities itself.
Thank you so much, Jenitha. Coming to you, Sabina, your perspective on what role can corporates play in helping the curriculum and higher education sector?
Great. So I'm going to answer Rahul and Leen's questions a little bit and build into what Jenitha just said. I think a lot. And I'm going to give a really nice example of a company that in 1997, Cisco, I don't own shares in Cisco and I'm neither a promoter for them, but I love the program that they set up. So in 1997, they gave some technology equipment as a donation to a school, and then were flummoxed because there was no one to teach that, right? We're talking about learning technology at our age where we are. So Cisco employees started to volunteer teaching at these schools. Now, what's interesting is, at that point, Cisco realized that there was a dearth of IT savvy talent. And if their business was going to succeed, and this is all before the year 2000, so we're talking about 20 plus years ago, they've started the academy to build IT skills. It's then morphed into a business for them. And we now have the Cisco networking academy. But from a strategic point of view, it was one of the smartest moves to make ever. And this is where we need to build into when we keep talking about whether it's private-public partnerships, whether we're talking about getting businesses and corporates involved in our educational system to say almost every company talks about talent acquisition, almost every company talks about skill set. So that for me is the strategic aspect. And I think sometimes numbers kind of help ground us a little bit. From 1997 to today's date, I went onto their website today, they've actually trained about 12.7 million students in 180 countries. They also, and going back to Leen's point, teach educators, because all of us need to skill ourselves as well. And they do that for free. So they're actually creating this wonderful, wonderful ecosystem for them to benefit. And their competitors very quickly realized what an advantage that was, because suddenly they had talent that was available and ready to do it. The second thing I would say, and I'm going to try and say this very, very quickly, is the why. I think we need to touch on something like the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals, because they are now, that's the whole business government relationship and shared responsibility, right? What are corporates doing to make this come alive? And I have a lovely example from Lego, a child's play. I know it isn't for higher education, but I'm trying to see, can we scale something like this for our higher education students? And that they basically put together a game, a Lego set, which talks about building a turbine model with a book of instructions. That's really clever. That's a business strategy, but it's also working with the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals to actually sing that together. And in India, I think we have a prime opportunity with the CSR law, because that law has allowed corporates under its annexures to be able to spend on education and gender diversity. So why don't we combine those, working with businesses, and create, better opportunities for STEM for women? You're actually going into creating a pool of talent, and then going back to community, which is something I think Rahul talked about a little earlier as well. That's our license to operate. So you're impacting stakeholders around you. And then on the individual level, something that Ashish talked about, guest speakers, make it a KPI for every company to have KPIs of actually doing a guest talk, being a mentor, actually doing a team project. I have my students work with friends of mine who are in business, and they do a team project for a company that needs a question to be answered. And here's a free consulting gig, right? They're getting a whole bunch of very smart students who are actually working on something for them. So I think for me, it has to be a real win-win situation. And that's how corporates should be actually very intrinsically, very, very strategically working with higher education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina. So if I could sort of come to the two of you, Professor Paape and Professor Pani, how are you seeing higher education institutions trying to deal with more of the regulatory requirements? Or is litigation going to be something that you're going to look out for because of, be it digital, be it the issues you may run into with unethical practices of students or whatever? Are you seeing that being an area that institutions need to start preparing themselves for, which is dealing with regulatory and legal risks a lot more?
Who you would like to start, Subhashis, Professor Pani?
Go ahead, Professor.
Well, thanks. That's, of course, a very good point. Let me be quite frank and honest. Rules are the problem, not the solution. So yes, we have many of them, and even more are coming into place. And this is going to cause not only a lot of costs, of course. You have to adapt as an institution in proctoring and taking exams. That was already mentioned. And this is going to be not only costly, but also it's causing what I would like to call a lack of trust. Of course, you have to deal with the issue of ethics, and you have to teach your students that, well, they should live up to the rules that are applicable. But again, many of the rules are also outdated. They are not suited in the, I would say, in the 21st century. And they most certainly are not suited always for the technology-driven way we do our business now as a business school, as a business university. So I would like to take a close look and talk to the rules, to the regulators, and say, let's sit down and see what we can do to either live up to the expectations of society and the business and students, and what we can do to prevent that, let's say, the rules are going to hamper us in innovation, and also hamper us in the way we are going to do the teaching. And indeed, like Sabina said, how do we learn? Is that something which we need to take a close look at again? Because I truly believe there are more ways to coming up with a curriculum and the way we do our teaching than we are already, let's say, acknowledging. So that would be my take. I would like to require less rules and at least update them, because they are not only costly, but they're also hindering us. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you. Professor Pani.
So with the increased focus on innovation and creativity, there are bound to be ramifications for the regulatory compliances soon. The fast-changing world would demand greater autonomy and freedom with the democratization of the knowledge, which is always rapidly happening. Like recently, one instance which has created a lot of discussion, when Elon Musk invites applications from anyone who possesses the knowledge. So no certificates, no degrees. So that's what regulators could think in a deeper sense, that more graded autonomy should be given to the institutions to offer the skill development works, ways to make fit the students in the corporate world or any type of work they want to do. Now, mainly we are talking about processes we follow in the institutes, like the corporate governance. Now, when a management school, mainly when they go for some accreditations like ASASB, AMBA or EQUIS, what is the process they ask to lay down is a very good process, so that if you follow those processes, the outcomes will be good. So that's what I feel the regulating agencies looking to the new education policy, a lot of changes has been made by all the regulators. Only thing is now the implementation. So possibly those things, what we are talking now, if we implement, that will have a greater autonomy to the institute to offer courses which will help students to find a job in the corporate or the social sector or any sector. Thank you, Subhasis.
Thank you so much. Professor Pani. So at this stage, let's start getting towards the end of the session. If I just want to go around the panelists and ask you for a quick minute of your views on some of the leading practices that you believe higher education should be now looking to embrace. So if I could come to you, Professor Vij first.
Okay, so Ashish, let me say that risk management for universities, could be educational institutions, should just ask three fundamental questions. One, what is the mission of the institute? Second, what is the strategy we have to achieve the mission? And finally, what risks might derail us? Having said that, we do understand that risk management, its acceptance is a little less in educational institutions than in the corporate world. But even at a little risk here, let me very frankly say that for the educational institutions, it's very important that we do not get caught up in COSO or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act or just financial risk management. We need to have our own set of policy, and I think that is something which the education institutions should invite. Thank you.
Thank you. Rahul, yours take on it.
based on the conversation that I've heard today, there are a couple of things that are really jumping out at me, and this is specifically targeted at higher education. Okay, I'm sensing that the case for deregulation of some sort or the other, and the freedom for academic institutions to set their curriculum and the delivery methodology and the delivery model is a prerequisite for anything that meaningful or which needs to be done or which can be done going forward. I also think there is an opportunity, and it's a bold statement potentially to make, is for academic institutions to actually ask themselves some probing questions about, well, what is really the true role for scorecards? Okay, I mean, if you were in a corporate environment and you saw something which was a constraint to further evolution, you would ask the question, do we really need scores? Okay, do we need grades? How should we be reacting and responding to grades? What do they all mean in the long term, right? So I'm just using that as an illustration to say that there are some fundamental principles of how we have viewed our education model, okay, which I think need to be reassessed. And I think this is quite the right time for it.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Jenitha, your perspectives on this.
I'm going to latch on to what Rahul has said from the perspective of being a little bit controversial, obviously with my corporate experience coming into play here, in that, you know, you've seen business models and operating models change, and I've got a little bit of a formula, D squared C to the power 5. And I think for me, academia needs to consider their business models in that context itself. When we talk about this data, the world that we're living in being data and digitally driven, creating those data digital driven insights, and from the perspective C to the power 5, you know, we need to consider from a risk management perspective, how do we enhance the maturity of risk management in these domains on the C to power 5? Who are the university citizens? What are their needs? What are their expectations? How do we calibrate those expectations against a corporate world that is again very turbulent, uncertain, but novel at the same time? The other C is understanding the competitive landscape and the fact that we've got, you know, online has become open. We've got the MOOC in terms of educating and learning, understanding that competitive landscape, again, talking about it from a risk management lens. What are the conduct and culture indicators that universities need to consider from a reputation management perspective? From a compliance perspective, something that I've noticed is that you've seen a convergence of different disciplines in the workplace. And how do we leverage that at universities itself? And lastly, the cyber-physical world we are living in, the threats and opportunities, what would be our vigilance and our resilience interventions around these aspects, and then consider the 3 lines model. And again, it would be remiss of me coming from the IIA, and you know, we've put out this new 3 lines model. How can the 3 lines model and combined assurance be embraced within universities and higher education as well? So those are key things for me from a leading risk management perspective, is how does the institutions, the higher education institutions, embrace and emulate what's happening in the business world to understand their risk management in their own organization, so you're not derailed from achieving that strategy and the intent and the mission in terms of what we serve and what our mandate is. Thank you, Subhashish.
Thank you so much, Jenitha. Sabina, if I may come to you next.
So in the interest of time, a very simple strategy. I'd like to combine risk mapping and stakeholder mapping, pretty much as this conference is doing, and have business, government, and academia sit together and decide what are the risks and what are the strategies going forward. I don't think it should be done in silos. I think it has to be done holistically with all 3 working together. And maybe getting some student bodies in as well and parents as well. So all stakeholders, risk mapping, I think we'll have a strategy going forward. Thank you.
I'm deliberately coming to you last, Professor Paape, because you also have a question to answer from the audience. But before we come to you, Professor Pani.
Yeah, I will focus on 2 things that possibly the higher education should focus on. One is that currently most of the ranking agencies look into the research. That's the importance of the research has gone high in most of the engineering management schools. Now, what my point is that the research what we do, nothing for the community. That's what the place which you belongs to. Possibly we'll focus on some research to find out the problems which can solve those problems, what local community is facing. Second is that to reduce the risk, that's what the new education policy, what Professor Vij was talking about, that the foreign institutes can start their schools here in India. So now it's a time to most of the higher learning institutes to try to see the best schools from throughout the world who can complement their expertise, and they can collaborate with those schools so that the delivery of content, the learning of the students will be much higher. Thank you, Subhasis.
Thank you so much. Professor Paape, your views, and you also take the question that
Thank you, Subhasis. Yes, there was an excellent question asked by Mrs. Bindal, and the question was, what strategy shall be adopted which may soften the debate of taking the risk of investing in people? There is an echo, by the way. I'm not sure why. Oh, Professor Pani, perhaps you could unmute. Yeah, thanks. And that is an excellent question. And I would like to come back to my own career. I have always been active in business and always been active in academia. And on either side, I wasn't taken too serious, because they said, well, you are an academic, and on the business side, and on the academia, they said, well, you are a business guy. So more or less, I was never, I would say, fully embedded by either the business community or the academia. And I didn't mind, because I liked it very much. But the point I would like to make is that if we are able to reconnect business and academia on a higher level, that would be wonderful. We are talking a lot about 21st century skills and competencies. And if I look at businesses, and I'm a non-executive myself, I always look at the budget, which is in the books for education and training and development. And almost always, this budget is not really being used on an annual basis, meaning that the business community is not investing as much as they should have, as much as they were planned to do. And then again, at the end of the day, we say, well, there is now innovation at hand, and there is a crisis at hand, and people lack the skills. And then I always tell them, well, why didn't you invest timely? And if you would have done that, perhaps you would have been able to make sure that they were well skilled and were able to live up to the expectations of that moment in time. So yeah, connecting academia and business, easily said, I know. But again, I truly believe, Rahul, there is a need to do that. And let's say make sure that we are going to invest in people. And if we invest in people, then we need academia. And then the issue of the budget and the revenue at the part of the business university will be taken care of as well. So reconnect, and I'm most in favor of that. And I know it's easily said and not so easily done, but I hear a lot of good ideas in this panel. So yeah, let's make it happen. Thanks, Subhasis.
Thank you so much. And if at this time if I may sort of invite a very special guest amongst us who's been sort of listening in patiently through this entire discussion, Professor Saxena. Thank you so much, sir. Professor Saxena is the reason why this entire initiative that we as GRMI embarked on, which is coming up with a research paper on covering disruption in the higher education sector, managing risks. It was his idea. He's the one who pulled initially me into it, and then we've carried it forward. Thank you so much, Professor Saxena. So without much ado, I'll just first request you to say a few words on your perspective on managing risks in higher education sector, and then would request the panelists to launch the research paper. But first, over to you, Professor Saxena.
Thank you, Subhasis. I was listening to the very interesting panel discussion that was just going on, and since morning I'd been busy in one session and another, and so therefore it was interesting to really listen to this panel discussion. I, for one, believe that there are three major disruptors today in higher education so far as India is concerned. Two are global, and the third is so much Indian. The two global kind of phenomena are the technology part of it. First is obviously the technology-led disruption. The second is the entire gamut of COVID-19, which has really brought about a rethink in higher education. I believe that these two factors, and it is not that technology was not leading the change, or it was not that the change was not occurring in the higher education, but perhaps it was slow and steady. Higher education has always been in a state of what I call it as the paused equilibrium. There's always been a paused equilibrium. You know, we hate the change. As academicians, we hate change. And we live in the comfort of what we are doing. We believe that that is the way that it is. And that has suddenly now got shaken. The COVID-19 has virtually shaken up that kind of a thought process. Take a look at it. And from there, I'll take towards your risk management kind of an area. Very clearly that the university models conventionally have been built on a very, very conventional model, which is based on a linear growth, that you're going to continue to have the same kind of a growth. Demand will continue to be there for higher education, no matter what is really happening around. Today, we are seeing a challenge to that. And as somebody was mentioning, the challenge is coming up from a skill certifying bodies that are there, the various agencies that are there, the various non-university institutions that are there, like, for example, the Coursera's, or let us say even yours, GRMI, and many of the other institutions that are there today in that area of skilling. And why? Because obviously from an employer point of view, the skill is more relevant than just a degree or a diploma itself. So now today I feel as an educator, a question that is coming up, and the student is continuously asking me, why should I enroll for your program? And therefore that puts a big kind of a question mark on my model, which was based on the linear growth itself. The second part of this model has been that it has been very exclusive kind of an education. Exclusive only for a few people who can really afford it. Today, technology allows us to make education more and more inclusive. It helps us to reach out to a much larger group of people. And therefore, the quality of education is also really going to be a very big kind of a question mark. So once again, the same question comes up over there. And so therefore, from all this angle, and these are the two big kind of a part that came up, the COVID-19 and the technology. But the third is the NEP, the National Education Policy 2020, which opens up an absolutely new vistas and new opportunities itself. Whether this is skilling, it is in the area of research, it is in the area of student engagement, whatever that we talk about it, we find that there is a whole lot of new opportunities that have just come about. Every time that I have looked at the new education policy, I found that there is one of the biggest challenges that I have is whether if I start implementing it, what would be the cost of it? The fact is that today, the risks are substantively higher in higher education. This is the first time ever that the higher education is talking about risk. It has never really talked about risk, because we have lived in an era which was very, very different kind of an era of, as I said. So the risks which are in the area of, for example, the debt servicing, student debt servicing, for example, $1.5 trillion is the US debt on student education itself. You know, look at that, the students over there who are under $1.5 trillion US education debt itself. Imagine the same thing happening in India as it really grows. We talk about the GER growing up or increasing itself. So when the debt servicing becomes a question mark, the future of education also becomes a question mark. The relevance of the education now becomes a question mark. The relevance of the universities become a question mark. And the other part of it is obviously the institution's ability to service the debts, because of the huge investment today that has existed or that has been made in physical infrastructure. And a question that is today begging an answer from the management is, was it a right decision to put 500 crores in one of your campuses itself? When really speaking, the model of education has changed. But as we moved into technology, we realized that, well, technology doesn't come free, and technology also has its own kind of risks. We have already seen the kind of ethical practices today being coming up in a very big way at the student level, even at the faculty level. There are serious kind of questions that are coming in. And that can possibly affect the reputation of the institution. So to my mind, when I start looking at it in today's kind of a context, I believe that it is just the right time when institutions need to think in terms of developing a risk management model in higher education, different from the corporate world, but at the same time learning from the corporate world as to what are the best practices that they have really had and what can really be done about it. We in FICCI, and especially in Higher Education Committee, this year thought about it as to having this kind of a session with GRMI. And I'm pretty confident that the report that is being released today is going to be just the beginning of a much bigger kind of an intervention and a much bigger kind of a, I would say, interaction in higher education institutions on this particular area of risk and the risk management. Thank you very much, Ashish, for giving me this opportunity. I must say,
thank you so much, sir, for giving. Sorry, go ahead. Finish, please.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying, thank you so much, sir, for providing us this platform, for your words on the relevance of risk in the higher education and teeing up this launch so perfectly. So at this point in time, if I can request all the panelists to just go ahead with the ceremonial launch of the research paper, which is named Disruption in the Higher Education Managing Risks. I think it's packed a little better than it should have been, but that's okay.
Great.
Sabina, I think you're trying to, yeah. Professor Pani is, just give it a second. He will have his as well. And that's why I said it's packed a little better than possibly it should have been. But again, thank you so much, dear panelists, for doing this launch. Thank you again, FICCI, for providing this platform. Obviously, thank you, Professor Saxena, for putting us in. Can't thank Rajesh and Nidhi enough from FICCI, Team FICCI. And obviously, do want to remember the one who we initiated this with, Shobha Mishra Ghosh. I know you are not with FICCI anymore, but you were the one who initiated this. So thank you, everyone. And with that, happy to sign off for this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.